What's something you found so pretentious that it actually rendered you speechless? When I was working a crappy job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels." To which I replied, "Well sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly, this is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. I imagined a group of urban youth popping up out of nowhere and saying, "Darn, you got served, sucker," immediately after you said that. I was at a museum looking at some contemporary art. Out loud, I said, "I don't get it." Some guy looked over at me and smugly scoffed, "Oh, I do." I was watching that show where contestants have each other over for dinner parties and rate the experience. There was this sweet little Irish lady and then a bunch of pretentious foodies. She made a shrimp appetizer with a roe sauce that all of the foodies were gushing over. They kept talking about detecting a hint of this, or a touch of that, or whatever, and then the camera panned back to the Irish lady. Her secret recipe? It's just mayonnaise and ketchup. TLDR. Mayo and ketchup is freaking delicious. I was working with a client in my showroom and another client of mine had called twice. My co-worker gave me the message and I called him back right after my consultation was over. He was peeved that I didn't excuse myself to answer his phone call. Apparently he told my co-worker that merely taking a message was inexcusable because of the thousands of dollars he had spent. He told me, "This is pretty much verbatim. Tell your co-workers that if I call you out to be notified immediately, you will excuse yourself immediately and get on the phone. Your other clients won't mind." He explained that his calls will only take a minute or two. Guess how long that particular conversation was? 56 minutes. Dude's in his early 60s. You never outgrow being a spoiled brat. I work in a police dispatch center and a rather prominent woman of our town called in to report some damage done to her front porch. She insisted she would only deal with the chief of police and no one else. This was about 10 p.m. I informed her that A, the chief is only at station during business hours, and B, he would not be handling this case anyway as any patrol officer could handle it. She insisted I call the chief at home and have him come in, or send an officer to his home to wake him, as she was too important to deal with a patrol officer. If she was so damned important, the chief would have given her his personal phone number. I work as a bartender and our wine bottles range from $42 to the most expensive bottle of wine, which is a $75 bottle of Petite Sirah. One day these two women came in to see the wine list by bottles and said that our wine including the Syrah were too lowbrow for their taste and walked away. An older English woman sitting at the bar overheard, looked at me and said, "Ooh geez, what are they, Rothschilds lol." Working retail, I hear things like, "Do you have any idea how much money I spend here every year? Enough to pay your wages." I often wish I had enough money to buy a business and only hire employees with the foulest of mouths. I would then make their employment conditional on their ability to tell off customers who gave them crap. All hints of thoughts of envy over my friend's good-looking Irish boyfriend came to a stop when the following came out of his mouth. "The thing about real jazz is you don't listen to the music listens to you. Haha, oh my 56 upvotes. He is a redditor as it happens, so I hope he sees this and feels suitably chastised." In Soviet Russia. "Oh, I don't read fiction. Life is far too interesting as is. Oh yes, I only read literature." Some douche talking to the librarian the other day. I was riding along with my brother and sister-in-law when they were casually house hunting, and I directed them to a very nice neighborhood where one of my cousins lives. My brother and sis-in-law are both attorneys and own their firm and are pretty successful, so I thought they would like this neighborhood. As we drive through my cousin's neighborhood, my sister-in-law scoffs in disbelief and I quote, "How does your cousin afford to live in this area? She's a dentist and her husband is a teacher. How can they afford to live here and we can't yet? I'm an attorney. I should be living here." My brother and I were speechless. When I tell horror stories about her, I like to tell this one so people can get an idea of the kind of person she is. I have quite the pretentious brother-in-law. Before they were married, he was living in an upmarket flat house which has a view of the neighbor's backyard. One day he stands there looking into their yard and notices their table umbrella, which was slightly dirty. With a look of disgust he says, "How can people have an umbrella like that? They shouldn't be allowed to live here." WTF. Don't know if it's quite the proper definition of pretentious, but my aunt was telling me her son liked rock music. I said that was cool and that I liked rap. She goes, oh, Jard's a lot deeper than that. Great, thank you for that. I got a chuckle out of it though because I knew my cousin liked rap just as much as me, so it just proved how clueless she was about her own kids. I was once stuck with a social group of CEOs. They didn't know me. I mostly kept to myself and listened to their talk. I guess in order to bond, a woman was telling the rest of her shameful secret. She liked to occasionally eat at Outback Steakhouse. She really got a ribbing from everyone. They were merciless. She, red-faced, staring at the floor, giggled that she thought it was exciting that she never knew who else might be in there. She might actually be eating a table away from her garbage man. I exchanged pleasant small talk with a few group members. I work construction, but being a petite, nicely dressed woman, I guess I wasn't sending off vibes. As we were parting ways, and I was walking away, I distinctly heard a woman whisper, "Is she blue collar?" 111. I've never been so happy to not be upper class and have these people as my social circle. It's hard to believe that people like that exist. At the same time, though, it isn't. My family is rich and upper class. Still doesn't mean we're pretentious dongs. But the amount of pretentious crap we get from others in our community. We're Pakistani. It's usually from marriage. Worst one I heard. Her family is so poor. The dad's only a pharmacist. And her skin color? It's so dark. It's usually about skin color and money. Since my family is rich and I'm very white in my skin tone, I get a lot of compliments from these pretentious hags. I usually just say, "We're actually drug overlords. This isn't my real skin. I'm gonna marry a black man." It usually freaks them out. "This isn't my real skin" is fantastic. Don't know if this is necessarily pretentious, but it's freaking egotistical. After we get a test back, the kid who I sit next to in bio looks up at me all bewildered and goes, "It's almost like she's taking off points because I'm smarter than her." I don't know. There are some pretty fricked up teachers out there. In a professional communications course, I lost 3 or 4% of my total marks for an essay because the professor was convinced he'd was not a real word. Then when I continued to argue with him, my mark mysteriously dropped a full grade. My cousin was staying with me because she was running away from her crazy boyfriend. She's used to her life in a gated housing community where money is handed to her. I lived in a middle class neighborhood and she stayed in my extra bedroom with her kids. We were on our way to get her daughter and went to the gated community she used to live in. She said to me, "You have to go in and get her. I would just die if anyone saw me like this." After we left, she sighed and said, "I can't live like this. I just can't do this anymore." Thinking she had come to her senses, she followed it with, "I have to get my nails done. Look at them." I have a friend who has this really irritatingly pretentious habit of saying "of course you do" after someone expresses an opinion he disagrees with. For instance, I think Sublime was one of the best bands in the 90s. Of course you do. I'm stealing this one. It's the perfect weapon against hipsters. Hipster sneero. I only listen to lounge rap disco folk. Sorry. Of course you do. I never knew what an apple or orange looked like until I came to college because my mom would always have the maids peel them. That can't be real. I heard a kid in the library the other day talking about how he was going to fail one of his finals. Then he said, "It doesn't matter. Once you're in the 1%, it's not like you can leave." I was working as the assistant manager of Goodwill, and some lady walked into the store, little yappy dog in hand, and proceed to put it into the part of the shopping cart you set your baby. I calmly proceed to say, "Excuse me, we do not allow pets in the store." She tells me her dog has separation anxiety and she cannot leave him out in the car. My mouth fell open and I stared at her for a full 3 seconds before even starting to think about how to respond. "Well, I'm sorry that your situation prevents you from shopping here. Goodbye." This is kind of the opposite. When I was in high school as a freshman looking to volunteer at the local museum, I decided I wanted to work in the physics lab. They asked me why, and I said, "Well, I already know everything about everything else." 19-year-old me wants to go back and slap 13-year-old me several times. Standard red flag. If you can't enumerate at least 30 things you know that you don't know, you don't really know a lot. I make Christmas presents for my family and friends because I'm broke in college and it's fun. This year I'm canning salsa and I asked my boyfriend if he wanted to split the cost with me. He said in the haughtiest voice I've ever heard, "No thanks." I buy my family presents and then proceeded to tease me for being cheap. Ginormous red flag, comma. Dump his butt and send me some of your salsa. I wrote a Facebook status about how enjoyable it was to study when you're the one teaching the material to someone. This turned into a conversation with my friend about how much he likes to over-explain things when he's drunk, and how funny he is when he's drunk. This girl name chimes in, "Well, I'm glad that I've sworn to never drink." To which my friend and I say, "That's fine, to each their own." And she has the nerve to say, "Nah, I've known too many alcoholics to ever let a drop touch past my lips," and something about there's no such thing as moderation with alcohol. And I say, well, I grew up with an alcoholic mother, watched her get beaten by her equally alcoholic boyfriends, puke blood regularly, and pass out daily, all when I was 5. I know what moderation is. She then says, "Well, you have the right to your own opinion, but I simply cannot respect anyone who drinks alcohol." She makes statements like this on a regular basis. If you hunt, smoke, eat meat, don't believe in God, drink, act, she thinks you're a bad person. She also manages to make every single conversation all about herself and is one of those infuriating people who will talk your ear off about her problems and refuse to listen to any advice. ARGH. In the past year I've had 2 Midori sours. I guess I'm a horrible alkie with no self-control. At a Starbucks near my office in Midtown Manhattan, where everybody is a Banana Republic clone, there's an employee who takes drink orders before you reach the register. He doesn't wear anything like a hat, apron, or name tag which identifies him as a Starbucks employee. Not having encountered him before, I suggested that he should wear some Starbucks swag. His response, "No, the guests of this Starbucks expect a more professional experience." So I was going to say something more well thought out about this, but the best I could come up with was, "It's freaking Starbucks." One of my first roommates was from a very rich Indonesian family. She had never dressed herself before, and on our first morning she stood up and outstretched her arms and waited for me to dress her. I looked her dead in the face and told her she wasn't my Barbie. She got the hint and discovered the wonders of buttons that day. I don't know about speechless, but I often find it pretentious when someone replies to something with a quote. "I will not enter a battle of wits with an unarmed man" is a favorite, but George Orwell quotes are the worst. It's ironic that the sort of people who like to call everyone else sheeple are interchangeable individuals who somehow manage to all think and talk exactly alike. I mean, come on. Most of these people never even read 1984. Quotation is a serviceable substitute for wit. Oscar Wilde. My bar is a great cocktail bar, but a lot of people are taking the whole booze snob thing too far. The bartenders hate it. So, I'm sitting there and this douchey, fedora-clad 3-set comes in, sits down, looks around. Then one of them says, "Let's get out of here. This place doesn't even make its own vermouth." I was at a scholarly conference, and someone came up to me to tell me a well-known and much published author, standing across the room, wanted to speak to me. The implication was I should walk over to talk to her. I told the messenger, "Tell her she may approach." Yeah, so, after I told them how good my board was, they all started getting the same one, so I had to go buy a new one. The frick. Once at a restaurant here in Boston, with a bunch of friends, we all clearly saw and heard a man at one of the other tables whistle that shrill whistle and yell out "Garçon" very loudly to call a waiter over. He was completely in earnest about it. A waiter came over and he asked for something. We were all speechless for a few moments of "Did that just really happen?" When I was in university, one of my friends, who didn't go to the school, often came to visit us because he was dating a girl that also went to the same school. Anyways, one of my other friends, who I no longer talk to, is talking to the us. He begins to complain about how much homework he has and the difficulty of university. He then turns to friend 1 and says, "Oh, but you wouldn't understand. Like, seriously? Friend 2 said a lot of other crap like that, so I just stopped talking to him at all. You cannot come with me at Shea George's because you're too bourgeois, said my parents pay everything, both your flat and weed ex. GF when I asked her why she'd never invited me to come to this jazz nightclub for the poshy youth of the 6th Parisian district, a very poshy and rich neighborhood. I get the idea she doesn't know what the word bourgeois means. After my grandma died, my father bought the house and we moved in when I was about 6. Our neighbors next door had an awesome tree house. I went over to say hi and see if there were any kids there. The neighbors had 2 daughters and a son all around my age. They said straight to my face that I couldn't play with them, or play on the swing set or tree house. The father worked at a tannery, actually kind of a trash ball. Our neighbor behind us said right to my parents, my husband is an important doctor, and we do not talk to our neighbors. The first day, my father was an accountant, my grandfather a surgeon. Crap like that is way more baffling than a cake eater acting like a cake eater. Really pretentious guy I had to work with in a play a few years ago. I overheard him talking about growing up in a rich town and button. Me. Where are you from again? Greenwich? Him. Huh. Greenwich? No. Greenwich is all new money. Me. Oh. Had a friend in high school who, no matter what band you were talking about, he would always chime in, oh dude, I saw them live way before they were popular and only their first album is the real stuff worth listening to, or some hipster crap like that. One day my friends and I decided to completely make up a band and talk about it, and he said all the exact same crap. My roommate is a pretty nice guy, but when we play Super Smash Bros his ego goes through the freaking roof and he doesn't realize it. When he starts doing poorly he convinces himself that everyone is going for him, when in reality people who are near him attack him because they are near him. Anyways, a couple weeks ago he said, and I quote, I know why you guys always go for me. You don't like to see me in first at the end of the game. I guess I would get pretty fed up too if someone else kept winning all the time. I have never met a person in my life who takes casual video gaming as seriously as he does. I went to school with this girl who copied everyone's work and didn't end up graduating, but she acts like she's the most intelligent being to ever walk the face of the earth. She basically shoots on everyone for liking things that are currently popular and complains about how she's the only person left in our generation that reads Shakespeare and loves anything classical. She recently made a fan page for herself on Facebook and posts quotes that she comes up with and artsy pictures of herself. I guess your movie was entertaining, but you need to focus more on visuals than story. Story doesn't account for anything in film. My film teacher. Well, to be fair, the Transformers series are incredibly successful. I always find the Keep Tahoe blue bumper stickers on SUVs to be pretty pretentious. And I don't think the people who put the Oval Outer Banks, OBX, stickers on their cars on the East Coast understand the joke. Firefighters can be pretty full of themselves. Former FFEMT here. I don't know how many times I've heard one say something to the nature of, hey, we can't spare the time to do that. We're too busy saving lives out there. Vomit. Working at a grocery store in a small town, I was taking a check and asked for the ID, and the dumb bee said, don't you know who I am? And I said, obviously not, and if I did I doubt I would be impressed since you're shopping here. So I guess I wasn't quite speechless, but it was totally worth it when she asked to speak to the manager and I showed her, on my name tag, that I was that shift's manager. She never wrote a check without showing ID again. So who was she? While at a party someone started speaking about religion. Knowing how this would play out, I decided to sit back and watch. At some point I started zoning out and began checking out many other things on my Android. Finally I heard some guy in a douchy voice say this gem. Do you even know the Four Noble Truths? I immediately began bursting out in laughter and told the group that was the most pretentious thing I have ever heard a human say. I answered the phone to one of the managing directors of the company I work at. I said hello. He said hi. Then I asked how I could help him. He then went mental because I'd asked how I could help him and that I didn't know what he wanted or who he was. I quipped my voice recognition software couldn't obtain motive or identity from a 2 letters, thinking nobody could be so stuck up and that he must be joking. He got me my first written warning, which I keep somewhere because of its comedy value. I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm a Christian, but you don't need to be in the pew to know that there is something wrong in this country when gays can serve openly in the military, but our kids can't openly celebrate Christmas or pray in school. As president, I'll end Obama's war on religion and I'll fight against liberal attacks on our religious heritage. Faith made America strong. It can make her strong again. How pretentious. America could be a guy. Frick, my mind is strong. Talking with a friend of mine at uni. Both of us have had problems the past in high school. She's bulimic and I was a self-harmer to the point of suicide. Anyway, she's still got her problems, and I don't. I give her the number of the hospital I went to, which helped me get my life back on track in an attempt to help and stop her bitching about her life and do something about it. She looks at the number, wrinkles her nose, crumples the paper up and throws it away. I ask her why, and her response? You gave me the number of an NHS hospital. I don't do the NHS. I've got private healthcare for a reason. We're both British, and for the non-British, we get our free healthcare on the NHS. But if you're rich, you can opt out and pay for your healthcare. This from a girl who still claims she has problems and will supposedly do anything to get rid of them. Beggars can't be choosers. Sunshine. My wife and I were sitting at an outdoor cafe in northern Michigan when a guy sat down at the next table. He leans over and asks us what we ordered, which were both meat dishes. We tell him and he leans back, crosses his arms, and says, I'd like to compliment you on your choices, but I'm a vegetarian. Then he smugly turned around and continued smoking his clove cigarette. While waiting for a lab to start, guy in my group casually asks, DB, hey derp, how much does it cost to fill your car? Me, oh I dunno, $40 or so. 91 Civic. DB, oh yeah, it's getting expensive. Supreme is at $XXX today. Me, yeah, I just use regular gas. DB, oh yeah, I know, I just mean, I can afford to put Supreme in my car. That was it, that's all he wanted to say. I was dumbfounded. I'm by no means poor, but I guess it was pretty clear I didn't come from money as he apparently did. I was at some heritage center before, and there were pieces of art on the wall there. Now this art was a blank aluminium sheet, with a small badly drawn circle carved onto it. It was titled Water. So I asked someone working there, the manager, I think, what did the piece mean, as I didn't understand. He said some crap like you have to find it within yourself, then told me to look out a window and asked me if I saw it yet, as if it would just hit me out of nowhere. I was becoming frustrated, so I point blank asked him what did he see. He said he couldn't tell me what he saw because it was influence what I saw and thus change my experience. Freaking modern art. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.